Welcome to the 151st Kentucky Derby preview show. Some big news to break in just a moment as we expect a massive crowd under the Twin Spires in Louisville, Churchill Downs. I'm Greg Wolf. I'll bring in the rest of the crew here in just a moment. We will head to the Kentucky Derby with journalism as a heavy and deserving favorite after that monster performance in the Santa Anita Derby and his comeback as a 3-year-old. His 2 starts in his 3-year-old campaign have been very good. Everyone playing catch up to him. Will he run that race again on Derby Day? We will find out. He's the 3-1 morning line favorite. 21 horses on that list. You see Rodriguez scratch that happened earlier on Thursday for Bob Baffert, one of the speed horses coming out of this Kentucky Derby. That was a Wood Memorial winner here in New York. So with his defection, not only does a speed horse come out, Baeza is able to draw into the field. We'll talk about that more in a moment as well. With me here on the desk, Andy Serling, Acacia Clement. We're all excited for what's going to happen on Saturday.
No, it's always a fun time of the year. There's so much build up to the Triple Crown and the Kentucky Derby, and obviously with our Belmont Stakes coming up 5 weeks later, it's going to be a great weekend of racing.
Let's talk journalism. And what is so good about him? Why does he deserve to be the favorite going in?
He's done nothing wrong since he's been stretched out in distance. And while you have a group of horses that want to show speed and another group of horses that want to come from very far off of it, the good thing about journalism is that he's somewhere in between. He can run wherever he is placed. Now, he did encounter a little bit of traffic trouble in the short field in the Santa Anita Derby, but maybe that was a benefit to do it then to show that he could overcome some adversity coming into a 20-horse field that he's going to be facing in the Kentucky Derby.
He's just faster than these horses if he runs his race.
And that's the big question. Mile and a quarter, no one's gone this distance before. Will he be able to run that race again at this distance? And weather, we're keeping our eyes on as well. We're expecting rain and a very good chance we're going to have a wet track on Saturday.
Yeah, they're expecting to get as much as 2 inches of rain. It's an unfortunate situation. They're going to have a wet track. We'll see. Smarty Jones won the Derby in wet tracks. I think other favorites have done well on wet tracks, but wet tracks play no favorites.
Favorites have not fared all that well going back to the last Triple Crown winner when Justify won it back in 2018. He was the last to do it.
He was, but before that, you had a whole slew of them, Justify and Always Dreaming and Nyquist and American Pharoah and California Chrome. So there have been plenty of favorites to get it done. And let me ask you a question up there. There also have been some relatively short prices that did pretty well. I don't think it's been just completely blowing up the tote board. Essential Quality lost to the Indian Spirit was 9-1.
You look at that list, obviously Fierceness was a standout in terms of when he ran his A race. The rest of that group, would you say journalism maybe the toughest favorite since, aside from him?
Well, I didn't like Fierceness last year, so I didn't think he was a tough favorite. But having said that, I think that he's one of the most likely winning favorites we've had in quite a while.
You can play the Derby and beyond by getting signed up with NYRA Bets. $25 free play plus a $200 deposit match sign-up bonus for new members when you punch in the code DERBY25 at sign-up right there at NYRABets.com. 3 years away for the man who has sort of embodied the Kentucky Derby, the Triple Crown, with all his success in the Triple Crown Series. Bob Baffert, he is back after that 3-year ban. But one of his horses, as we just said at the top of the show, Rodriguez, the Wood Memorial winner, he is out. Citizen Bull remains, who was a 2-year-old champion.
Yeah, Citizen Bull is a very, very unlikely winner. Bob Baffert might have a horse for the Belmont Stakes, though, running earlier in the card.
Oh, with more on this latest news and the horse that remains for Bob Baffert, let's bring in Maggie Wolfendale.
Yeah, we found out earlier today, Greg, via Tom Ryan, who is the racing manager for the ownership group of Rodriguez, via X, that unfortunately they will have to scratch Rodriguez due to a foot bruise, as it is a minor issue, but the horse obviously very sensitive, as we often say, no hoof, no horse. So they will wait it out and hopefully prepare for a start in the Preakness, but still in the starting gate for this year's Kentucky Derby, as Bob Baffert is happier than ever to be back at Churchill Downs, is Citizen Bull, who actually put in his final breeze for this 151st running of the Kentucky Derby on Monday. He went 58-2 for the 5/8, and I have to say, he did do it quite easily, and we are very accustomed to seeing Bob Baffert work his horses quite quickly, and Martin Garcia in the irons. Now, there is a big question mark, and Bob expressed it to me when I talked to him down in Louisville on Monday. The distance is a major question. Finishing a distant fourth to your favorite journalism when they last met in the Santa Anita Derby, I do think that a mile and a quarter is going to stretch this son of Into Mischief. But as you were saying, Greg, this defection of Rodriguez allows Baeza to draw into the field.
Yeah, interesting storyline here. So I'll pose this question to you. What is the bigger storyline here? Rodriguez coming out or Baeza getting in?
Baeza getting in. Rodriguez was going to have a tough time on the front end winning it, as talented as he is. Baeza's a genuine contender in this race, and had I known he was getting in, I would have made him my third choice in this race. And I'm thrilled he got in, because he wasn't getting in because of what I think was a very unfair rule made by Churchill Downs.
That's right. The short fields out in California, those races like the Santa Anita Derby, less points offered than would have typically been the case for horses trying to get into the Kentucky Derby starting gate. Now, Baeza, not only is he a talented horse, but he comes in with perhaps the strongest pedigree for this race of any horse in the field, given that he is the half-brother to both Kentucky Derby winner Mage and Belmont Stakes winner Dornick.
Trying to keep that streak alive, winning a Triple Crown race
on him
from the dam of Puka.
Amazing.
See if it can happen. Drawing in, and we had someone who drew in at the last minute. Rich Strike scored one of the biggest upsets in Kentucky Derby history. Some of the speed, Richard Migliore, is out of this race now. There's still plenty of speed in this race, but what does that mean for a horse like Sandman, who likes to come from so far out of it, who you saw up close win the Arkansas Derby?
Well, you know, it's interesting because I know he got a setup, and it was a pace meltdown in the Arkansas Derby. But even with the defection of Rodriguez, I feel like there's a lot of speed signed on. And in that respect, I feel like the Arkansas Derby was the best prep as a dress rehearsal, if you will. I'm not saying it was the best race. I'm not saying that Sandman's the best horse. What I'm saying is I think this was the best dress rehearsal. And Sandman came out of the Rebel, 13-horse field. Comes out of the Arkansas Derby that featured an extremely fast pace, a 9-horse field. So I feel like he's just maybe a little bit more battle-tested in that respect, and I expect it to be extremely fast-paced in the Derby, and I think he's going to run a similar race where there's going to be a lot of horses getting, weak late, and he'll just keep coming with that relentless stride of his. He is a long-striding son of Tappet. So from that respect, I like the Arkansas Derby, and I like all three horses, the first three finishes in the Arkansas Derby, to be contenders in the Kentucky Derby. Guys, I have no false illusions. If I could ride one, I want to ride journalism, but Sandman's a player.
Arkansas Derby win. Mark Casse said finally he put it all together. And even with that, though, he'd had some problems getting out of the gate. It had cost him before. We still see him a little green, wavering in the stretch. Still some things to figure out. Meanwhile, this man right here, this has been, I don't even know if it's arguable, the best story on the road to the Kentucky Derby. 71-year-old Lonnie Briley. Not exactly a household name, and the job he had done with Cole Battle, whose first loss on dirt, he started out 5 for 5 on dirt, was that third-place finish in the Arkansas Derby.
He's been a terrific story, and I'm not denying it, and I'd love to see him win for the connections. I think he got completely exposed in the Arkansas Derby. You can say he moved a little soon, and in the way the race was run at Acacia, he did. Having said that, he struggled to get by Cornucopian, who had just been involved in setting one of the fastest paces in the history of a 9-furlong race.
Absolutely. And we did see Cole Battle able to run down Matticat Road in the Rebel. Now, Matticat Road opting to go the shorter route in the Pat Day Mile instead of going the 1.25 miles in the Kentucky Derby. I have distance questions with Cole Battle as well. Now, that said, as far as the human interest story is concerned, seeing Lonnie Briley, the personality that he's brought, the charm that he's brought, the true horsemanship that he's brought to the journey to the Kentucky Derby has been a lot of fun to watch.
We'll take a timeout. Much more to come on this Kentucky Derby preview show as we eye the 151st running. Derby winning trainers looking for more. Well, we got plenty of them. 89 years young, D. Wayne Lucas. Hall of Famer Todd Pletcher, who started out with D. Wayne early in his career. Bill Mott would love to get one on the day. He won one via DQ. Brad Cox the same. And Ken McPeak coming off that historic Oaks Derby double.
At the Keeneland September yearling sale, the premier thoroughbred auction venue in the world, Mandy Pope of Whisper Hill Farm signed the ticket on the $5 million sale topper by Curlin, bred by Stone Street Thoroughbred Holdings. He was one of $5 million plus yearlings by Curlin to sell. No fewer than 55 of his yearlings fell to the auction gavel, averaging nearly $600,000, making Curlin the #1 sire of yearlings in 2024. Curlin, the classic sire.
Back on the Kentucky Derby preview show. Back in 1988, just the third time ever this has happened. And Dwayne Lucas went into this race in the Kentucky Derby with his filly winning colors, and he said it was probably the most confident he'd ever been about winning one. She was bigger than most of the colts in this race.
She was a tremendous horse. There's no doubt about it. This was a very good field. Now, there is a fair argument that both second-place finisher 49er and particularly the third-place finisher in this race, Risen Star, who won the next two legs of the Triple Crown, including the second fastest Belmont Stakes in history, were good, but you can't take it away from winning colors. And she came a nose away from beating the undefeated Personal Ensign to end that one's career.
She was amazing. And not only, she's one of the rare horses that can say she won both the Santa Anita Derby and Santa Anita Oaks going into the Kentucky Derby.
Dwayne Lucas, one of several trainers in this year's edition with Kentucky Derby wins, and we just got a late edition as well with John Sheriffs, with Baeza getting in with a scratch of Rodriguez. Lucas this year trying to win a fifth. 89 years old and still with a shot in American Promise, one that would like to be probably part of the speed scenario.
Was probably never a big favorite that Wayne Lucas would have one of the a Derby horse at age 89. So he's already overcome the odds. This horse winning seems to be impossible to me, Acacia.
He does look to be overmatched. He won the Virginia Derby pretty easily, but hey, Wayne just won the Kentucky Oaks with Secret Oath a couple years ago.
She was pretty good.
Sovereignty has always been very, very good. Precocious, he has a graded stakes win as a 2-year-old over this surface Acacia as well.
He's a horse that I think if you're looking for a closer, I think he's the best of the deep closers. He did not win the Florida Derby, but to me, Andy, I thought it was the perfect prep race for him coming in. It looks like he's peaking at the right time.
No argument for me. Just too short a price for me, but I agree.
Meanwhile, Final Gambit, trying something new on Derby Day, not necessarily a recipe for success. He'll be trying dirt for the first time.
He's a deep closer in a race with already proven deep closers that are dirt horses. He's run now on 2 surfaces, synthetic and turf. He's now got to go to a third surface, not one he's particularly well-bred for, or well-bred as he is for turf, and he's got to improve significantly. He's all yours.
It's a tough ask for sure. Now, he has turned some heads with the way he's been training over the main track, but it's a lot to find out if he can handle it in the biggest race of his career.
Lightly raced, most inexperienced in the field, and grande for Todd Pletcher. Despite all that, he ran huge in the Wood Memorial.
A big-time player off his Wood Memorial second, and he also is a middle-of-the-pack type horse.
I think he's a major player. He's a horse that I think will relish the distance. He is all legs. He has so much length to his stride as well. And while Rodriguez was able to wire the field and take control of things in the Wood Memorial, Grande was the horse who was having to drop back and make a late run.
Ken McPeak, historical Oaks Derby double last year, just the third trainer to ever do it, rendered judgments. 30-1 morning line.
Sounds like an owner call more than a trainer call. And this is a horse that thankfully Baeza gets in the race, because his inclusion at the expense of Baeza would have been unfortunate.
He was a distant second in the Virginia Derby behind American Promise, did not fire at all in the Bluegrass last time out. And Kenny had said, look, the owners want to take a shot. I understand you're only a 3-year-old colt once.
Julian
Never, in
Leperoux
my case.
will ride. Meanwhile, especially with what happened, not just last year, Forever Young, but that certainly was a big part of it, but all the success Japan has had on the international stage the last 5, 6, 7 years, we got to take an extra long look at the Japanese runners. As we look at what UAE Derby winners have done in the Derby, Forever Young, obviously, make the argument maybe he was best in the race last year. We start with this year's UAE Derby winner, Admire Daytona, who is by a Breeders' Cup sprint-winning sire.
Yeah, and he's potentially part of the pace, winning his last race in the front end. And Acacia, to me, he's already proven that he's inferior to the other Japanese horse, Luxor Cafe.
He was well beaten by Luxor Cafe at 2 back and beaten a nose by him even in a maiden score as well. But Admire Daytona won berth to this race, winning the UAE Derby, and he took pressure throughout with his pace every time. Now, that said, I think last year was probably the best UAE Derby winner we've seen come to the Kentucky Derby in a while in Forever Young, and definitely the best Japanese contender they had sent thus far, a rare talent in that horse.
Now, Luxor Cafe, even though just a nose separated these two Japanese runners back when they were 2-year-olds, looks like he has been the one that has sort of gone on with it.
Yeah, he's my third choice before Baeza got in. I'd move him to the fourth now. His last race was extremely impressive. I don't love him coming from Japan just 5 weeks after his last race, but he was good last time. Probably his best effort occasion.
He was so dominant. Now, it is a right-handed track that he's coming in off of winning at, but that being said, we've seen how these Japanese runners train, and he should be able to handle it.
Well, his race 2 back was on a left-handed track as well.
Yes, but if you're just looking at that one huge score, and I agree, he was very impressive.
The win last time out, didn't switch leads, but he was geared down late, and he went nearly as fast as older allowance horse races did later in the day in the nightcap on that same card. Let's go back to Mig right now. And Mig, in terms of who's impressed you the most in the morning, where do you wind up?
Well, in a Derby that the vast majority of these horses have been impressive. They look good in the morning. Journalism, your favorite. I loved his last work. He has such great animation to his stride, such great extension. And I love the way he did this. Now, we always talk about time of works and people get dazzled by fast times, right? Obviously, Citizen Bowl, 58 and change. But journalism, it was kind of an East Coast kind of work, right? Mike McCarthy was a longtime assistant to Hall of Famer Todd Pletcher, off in 13, finishing. Look at the way he's traveling. His mechanics are impeccable. Now, the rider asked him a little bit coming through the wire, wanting him to gallop out. And I think visually he was the most impressive this week. Obviously, he's put together a fine resume, but I love the way he's training up to it. And Maggie, you know how much respect I have for your opinion. Who's been catching your eye?
Well, Richie, when it comes to who would I rather be galloping / working in the morning, it is journalism. But I will say that Burnham Square turned a lot of heads with his workout beneath the Twin Spires with Brian Hernandez aboard back on Saturday. It was almost like Brian was giving a little prep because you're going to see him actually bounce off the rail right there, as Brian Hernandez knows that is the way to victory, winning aboard Mystic Dan last year and scraping the paint with his boot. Now, he did cover the 5/8 in 59 and 1, and he really wasn't asked that much. But this is a horse that every time he goes out there, he is a aggressive. You know, you see journalism out there, his ears are flicking back and forth, and he's just kind of taking it all in. This guy buries his head to his chest and really takes his riders on. So I often wonder, you know, and it was a possible excuse going back to being the beaten favorite in the Fountain of Youth, Greg. Is this a horse that just gets too undone by the energy of the crowd on Kentucky Derby Day? And does he do maybe a little too much prior to going in this starting gate?
Well, he's going to have a man aboard who delivered one of the great rides in Derby history and is the reason Mystic Dan won last year, Brian Hernandez Jr. Here is that win in the Bluegrass from Burnham Square.
I don't like the Bluegrass at all as a race. When you have almost the whole field together past the 8th pole and not finishing that far apart, especially in dirt races, it's usually a sign it wasn't that good a race. He got a fast pace, which he'll get to close into, but I agree with Acacia that Sovereignty is a better closer than he is. I don't want anybody out of the Bluegrass, Acacia.
No, I think that's fair. And I think Maggie also brings up a really important point with Burnham Square. He is a high-energy horse. He gets hot. That's typical of him, and you've seen it in the mornings a little bit as well leading into it. The Derby is an experience unlike any other, with the crowd that walks over with the horses from the moment they leave the barn to the moment they're in that starting gate.
Yeah, who can handle the chaos that you'll never experience on any other day like Derby Day, part of the storyline. Meanwhile, Steve Asmussen, looking for that first ever Kentucky Derby, has the Louisiana Derby winner coming in Tiz-tastic, along with a maiden in Publisher we'll talk about, but Tiz-tastic had his day on March 22nd.
But he's yet another deep closer, and I once again continue to agree with Acacia that Sovereignty is the best of them. And I think this race reminds me a little of the Risen Star, where Two Phils, I think, finished third, the eventual second-place finisher in the Derby, because Chunk of Gold moved too soon. As it turned out, he was too close to the pace, a pace that completely incinerated. Worked in the favor of Tiz-tastic, not necessarily in the favor of Chunk of Gold, who kept on running and finished second. So if I'm going to take somebody out of this race, it's the runner-up.
I agree, and you look at Tiz-tastic, who did win the Louisiana Derby last time out, not the best performances in prior prep races.
And you look at this record in the Kentucky Derby, and do you say, and specifically looking back to Epicenter, Steve says, D. Wayne Lucas, you owe me a Derby.
I think it just shows that Steve Ashman is not that good a trainer.
Ethereal road,
totally
scratching,
joking. I don't think these things
hours,
matter.
Minutes before the final scratch time, allowed Rich Strike to get in, and that 81-1 shot winds up beating Epicenter. It looked like he was going to win it.
I can imagine that there was some point when Steve Asmussen said, God doesn't want me to win the Kentucky Derby, and I sympathize. I feel bad for him because that's a brutal beat.
I remember when the Derby was coming up the next year, Steve said to me, I'm so happy it's Derby season again. And I said, why? He said, so they can finally stop playing the replay of Rich Strike running Epicenter down from last year.
Long shots to win the Derby? Well, yeah, Rich Strike is up there. Second biggest price in the history of the race. Country House, the DQ for Bill Mott back in 2019 when Maximum Security was taken down. Mind That Bird, who could forget that? Incredible ride from Calvin Burrell.
Listen, if you're less than 80 years old and you've bet the worst horse in the race every year, you're ahead.
So what long shots this time around do you think have a legitimate chance?
Well, for me, it's Chunk of Gold. I think it's very simple. He's a horse that ran better than it looks last time. He fits in the category of sort of middle of the pack horses. He's got to get a little faster, but you're going to get compensated at the window. So for me, there's no question he's the long shot I want to use.
He will be just that. Acacia, where do you wind up?
I like Grande. I think he's 20-1 on the morning line, and while he is not necessarily a deep closer, he can come from off of it. He can be mid-pack. I think he has a running style that some of the big horses, quote-unquote, in this race don't, and he's more tractable. As I mentioned earlier, he's all leg. I love him getting the distance. I think, yes, he's lightly raced, but I've been very impressed by what I see from him. I thought he'd taken a step forward physically from his allowance win into the Wood Memorial, and he made up ground while the winner wired the field that day.
And maybe longer, better for Grande with that pedigree. We're going to take a timeout. We'll be back. 151st running of the Kentucky Derby right around the corner. Selections from the entire crew when we come back on our preview show here on FS2.
have this weather and to have the beach and this racetrack, this is paradise. You can't beat it.
This is the Breeders' Cup World Championships from Del Mar.
Oh, it's wide open. Who's it going to be? Sierra Leone does it in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
For over 150 years, the Kentucky Derby has stood as the most enduring tradition in American sports. And in our time, one stallion is reshaping its legacy. Back-to-back Derby winners. His first son at stud siring another. A dynasty in motion. A motion that again has forward momentum toward Louisville, with another elite crop of 3-year-olds bearing his genes. Spendthrift Farm, home of Into Mischief.
Enhance your handicapping with AI Fast Facts, exclusively on NYRA Bets. Open your NYRA Bets app, click View Runner Details, and a stat-driven fact will appear for all U.S. thoroughbred racehorses. Download the NYRA Bets app to start using Fast Facts today.
General admission tickets are on sale now for the Belmont Stakes on June 7th at Saratoga Racecourse. Don't miss your chance to witness the historical third leg of the Triple Crown. Get your tickets today by visiting belmontstakes.com/tickets.
Back with you on our Kentucky Derby preview show. You can play all the action on Derby Day by getting signed up right there at NYRA Bets. You'll get a $25 free bet plus that $200 deposit match customer bonus at sign up when you punch in that code for new members, Derby25, and bet any track, anywhere, anytime at NYRABets.com. Time for the moment we've been waiting for. Selections here. We're going to start with Andy Serling.
I like journalism. I think he's going to be a very fair 3-to-1-ish in this race. I believe he's very much the best horse. I'm not trying to beat him. I'll use Chunk of Gold. I'll use Baeza. But to me, journalism, way the horse to beat, and I'll bet him to win. Keep it simple. Now, Maggie.
Andy, well, I'll keep the trend alive, as journalism is the horse for me. I have not been wowed by a horse like him since American Pharaoh. Just the way he moves, he breathes different air. So it's all about journalism for me, maybe a little sovereignty underneath. Casey, you gonna keep the journalism train rolling?
I'm not, Maggie. I landed on sovereignty. I think journalism is very much the horse to beat. But the more I looked at it, the more I kept going back to sovereignty and the way that Florida Derby would set him up for the Kentucky Derby. Now with Rodriguez coming out, does take a little bit of the pace out, but I'm hoping there is still enough speed on the front end for him to run into. Richie?
Well, I'm going back to journalism, guys. I always look at these races. If I was still riding, if I could ride one, who would it be? And journalism, to me, just has shown he's a standout talent, overcame a lot of adversity in a small field in the Santa Anita Derby. So even though it was a small field, I feel like he's battle-tested for a big field like the Kentucky Derby. And I'll be using some Sandman underneath him because I spent my winter here at Oaklawn, Greg.
And you would know better than anyone. I agree with Acacia. I like sovereignty a lot in this spot. Even with Rodriguez coming out, I still think there's plenty of pace in this race. He's been precocious from day one. Bill Mott loves the way he's been leading up into this race. This is a horse who's not typically a very good workhorse. He gets outworked by some lesser horses in the morning. He's been showing big-time interest of late, and I think he's coming into this race the right way. He's going to be tough, and I do think he's the best of the closers. Here's a look at everyone's selections. Journalism, how short? He's 3-to-1 morning line, Andy. What do you think he will be when the Derby goes off?
3-to-1 or 5-to-2. Horses are never that short in the Derby. American Pharaoh paid 5-to-2. And I think your point about sovereignty working well is a really interesting one, Greg, because he's historically been a bad workhorse.
He has, and that's to my point of him progressing and peaking at the right time. You know, you look at a trainer like Bill Mott, maybe he only, quote-unquote, won a Kentucky Derby because of a DQ, but he certainly knows how to get a good horse ready for the right moment.
Another great trainer that doesn't need a Derby win to prove it.
Not at all. One of the all-time greats to ever do it. Again, keep your eyes on the weather. Expecting a wet track. We'll see how that plays out on Derby Day. Enjoy your Kentucky Derby. Hopefully this show helped a little bit. We'll be watching. We hope you are as well. What a day we have ahead. Journalism will go to the Derby as the favorite for trainer Michael McCarthy. Been brilliant first couple of starts of his 3-year-old campaign. Bob Baffert back after a 3-year absence. Citizen Bull, his remaining lone entrant after the late scratcher Rodriguez. Mark Casse, the Hall of Famer. Can he get the Arkansas Derby winner to the wire? He'll be coming from the back of the pack to try and do it with Sandman, who will be holding the Derby trophy when it's all said and done. Enjoy.